Welcome back, everybody, to Cinema Daily US for this time, episode of New York versus New York, as I am Matthew Schuchman here in New York.
And I'm Louis Pedron here in Queens, New York.
I'm also in Queens, so this is going to be a real battle here. But we're here talking about the newest installment in the Fast and Furious series, Fast X or Fast 10. I'm not even really sure which we want to go with at this point. But Louis, I know this is your first foray into the Fast and the Furious world, surprisingly. So I'd like to get your initial thoughts right off the bat.
Yes, as a Fast and the Furious virgin, I was mesmerized with how fast and furious it was. Believe it or not, if I'm not mistaken, from the pandemic, that was my first Hollywood movie that I watched in the movie house.
Oh, okay.
I was like, whoa! It was like, I don't know, mind blowing, for lack of a word.
So was there certain parts that, were a little more like you were still amazed? Have you heard about the earlier versions of the kind of craziness that goes on with like cars alone in these movies?
Of course, I know for a fact that they do have money heist. They always have drag racing. They always have sexy, beautiful women and the family.
Yeah,
I know
and the
that
family.
the family is like an extended type of family, and that's usually a topic. And I did get surprised for a show or for TV. For a movie that has all the evil of criminal crime and all of that. They were talking about faith. They showed the cross a lot and talked about faith and believing in faith. I
Yeah,
got
well, that's
surprised with that
that,
topic.
and the family is it's the kind of like it's almost joke about the movies that it's become more and more of this kind of soap opera-y, kind of glib, ridiculousness. And I know we all go into these movies expecting that, and so it's not like you should get too um off your rocker to get upset with how ridiculous it can be. But I think it's getting to the point, for me at least, that it's getting too ridiculous. And by all means, actually, some of the action, even the car action, for as ridiculous as it does get, is even a little more grounded at certain times in this one than the other films. And trust me, of course, it does get out of whack, and physics never matters, and physics matters even less in this movie compared to the other ones. But it's hard to push past, I think, all of the gushy, gooey, stupid family stuff. Whether or not you have random cameos I was not expecting from early on. That kind of like some of the early one I understood why it's there. The later one, don't know why. It's pointless. I just think it's making people go, oh, look who it is. Sorry, everybody. This was an accidental spoiler that has been removed for your listening pleasure.
Anyways, yeah, there are a lot of cameos that are so surprising. Meaning, this franchise on the 10th or maybe the 11th actually has a very big budget. Would that be because they put a lot of advertorial? They have all the different beers and all the different cars. Would that be the case, or
I mean,
they are
you have
just making a lot of money,
you got a lot
raking
of
in
you got a lot
billions
of
of
action. You got a lot of characters that you baked into the series that you bring back. There are characters that you saw in this movie that were dead multiple times that have come back to life. And nobody knows if they're coming back, if they're supposed to be back, and then they're back all of a sudden. And then they just seem to bring every single one of them back. So like a lot of the characters and the actors you saw were in single films or double films, or maybe three at this point. And now it's just like they're in this one for maybe 5 minutes because they're going to, for what seemed to be what was supposed to be the final Fast and the Furious, possibly, or at least mainline Fast and the Furious, is now not only signified it's going to keep going on, but it's going to go on branching in multiple different ways. This is not I would I'd say a spoiler to people, but this is a cliffhanger, and you're going to be left waiting for a lot more in multiple different directions, without giving anything too much away. But I will say that Jason Momoa as the main villain in this one, he's just having a blast. He's just having the time of his life, and I can't say anything against him for it. Most of the time it's very entertaining. There are a few times where it's like it's too much, but I actually think he understood, to to quote the parlance of today's teens, he understood the assignment very well. You know, and because I think there are people who are in these movies who take it too seriously. I think there are people who take it completely unseriously. And I think there are people who found a line to ride, and he definitely found the line to ride. I think Charlize Theron always found the line to ride. And I will say that I think her hand-to-hand action stuff, I think, was the most entertaining parts of the movie. Early on, she's in a fight in a falling elevator, and she's smashing a guy's head against the concrete as it passes by the open door. I think that was the best thing in the entire movie, and it's gone in a flash.
And yeah, going back to your two topics, one with Jason Momoa. So I read somewhere that Lewis, my namesake, Lewis Leterrier, is actually got in this directing it 5 days, 5 days and a half before it shoots, and then he was asked about Jason Momoa's performance, and basically he said half of it was his and half of it was just Jason, just being creative like that. And I would do the same thing because I'm a trained actor, and people would say, our teachers would say, if you're a monster, be sure your monster is likable. And he created his monstrosity or whatever evil he brought in was so likable. He's a character that I would remember there. He was so likable that I want to have like a doll in my house that looks like Jason Momoa. He was really good.
Well, you know what I think is funny about it too is that yes, I again, they're going to keep this thing going because it keeps making money, and they obviously have a plan for it. You know, this one's going to splinter off into one thing and then keep going in another thing. And I can guess where some parts are going to happen, certain parts are not, but I'm not going to say it again, not to ruin it for people. But there is this point where I felt that the movie could have been contained in one actual 2 hour instead of 2 and 15 or 2 hour and 20 minute running time, where we didn't have to have this Joker story where it's, because Jason Momoa is kind of like Joker in The Killing Joke, where he's just there to torture. He's there to torture people, not kill them in essence. And I think you could have wrapped that up though, and had some big final showdown, which doesn't exist per se in what we got, and maybe closed it off. And again, that's where I would have preferred at this point, but I just think it went too far.
Okay, so as a Fast and the Furious virgin, they showed a lot of countries there that I got excited about. So lately I've been traveling, and those are the parts of the world that I've been going to. Portugal, then there's Italy and stuff. So all the different movies, they really travel the world, do the heist, and do all of that. And also that in most of their movies, do they actually show like a prequel, like what they did in this film? There was a big chunk of it that was practically a prequel.
Yeah. I mean, yes. I don't know what to call prequel. I would say, but I would say yes and no to a certain point. The timeline for the Fast and the Furious is very confusing, because there's the first three movies, and then the movies that take place after that technically take place before the third movie, and then all of a sudden it catches up with itself. And now for people who are going into this one starts with going back to the fifth movie. So the events that open up this film are both a retelling. Some parts of it are just reshowing, but then there's an expansion on it of the big finale of Fast Five, and that's how kind of where our villain comes into this one, because he's related to the events and some people from Fast Five.
And is it because of I don't know? May I ask you, since I don't know? Is it because Jason Momoa has exploded and they wanted to include a lot of Jason Momoa in Fast X?
Well, he was not in. You didn't see him in Fast Five. He didn't exist. You never saw him. You never heard about him or anything like that. They just chose him as their villain, and just cast him and went from there.
So they slipped him in.
Yeah,
the reason why I want to discuss that is it's research for me. Believe it or not, as an Asian guy who looks funny like this, my dream is to become a James Bond villain.
Okay.
And to create a caricature villain like that was funny but scary. It was I go like I can. This is my research. But anyways, Jason Momoa. he is so funny and scary in that one, and he even went gender bending every now and then, and that was a funny choice. Um, it was a funny choice for me, and I think it was effective.
You know what? Beyond Jason Momoa too. I mean, just like every film, I don't care how out of the box and crazy it's supposed to be. I still start to pick it apart. And I'm going to try and talk about this in a way that doesn't give away twists in the movie that I think are kind of obvious for the most part, but I
Of
still don't want to
course.
give them away to people who haven't seen it yet. But, ultimately the gang becomes technically the villain in the eyes of the agency again. And it all kind of happens with. All right, here's my question, and this is I'll just put it this way. Again, trying not to give things away. It makes you believe that early on Scott Eastwood was blown clear of his accident. You don't hear anything about Scott Eastwood for the rest of the movie. Did he die? Did they just forget about him? Did they not want to? I mean, I understand having him there would have made it harder for the agency to turn on the gang, but it's just like you see him kind of get thrown from explosion and then never heard from again.
So I don't know. I don't know.
It was very confusing to me, and that's
Okay. Another highlight of the movie is that kid knowing. Is that
oh, that's the first time
kid?
I don't know if it's technically because they have he looks very similar to the quote unquote baby they have when you see him as a baby, and I don't know if they actually just had the same kid grown up play the part. Honestly, I never looked it up, but that's technically your first time seeing him in essence.
Oh, okay. But what I was gonna say is, the child actor that they chose really acted well, because I know for a fact that you'll need to react to nothing like a green screen whenever you're shooting something like that. But he did. And he's not just a highlight; he's majority of the film as well, beginning to the end.
I don't. That's like those things like that. Like I know they need to play off the John Cena character because that he was introduced only in technically, I'll say the last film and a half in a way. But so having him now come back is a bigger thing, especially because it's now the first time he's the good guy technically. Because when we last left him, he was kind of still going against his brother. I don't know. It's so much to go into, and honestly, at this point, I can't now remember if it was 2 films ago that happened or 1 film ago that it happened. It's too much. But the whole point is that that's stuff that like we're watching that in normal movies to their benefit would not have spent so much time with. It's technically unnecessary. They only do it for an ultimate character development, we'll call it.
Right.
That isn't really that important because you could have held it. You could have cut down the cast for this one since you are expanding it into so many more films after this and dump that into another one and giving them more time. Instead, what we're giving here is just people given 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 5 minutes here, and then a group of other people doing technically nothing for most of the movie, only to have another cliffhanger ending for them at the end, which is not as cliffhanger as you think it is.
If I were to agree with you, it wasn't a 3-chapter movie. It was like a 8 to 10 chapter movie that was put into one movie, as you said. But anyways, John Cena. Amongst I don't know if I'm even supposed to say something like this, but if I were to say in acting, I think John Cena. I think I like as a performer in this one. Because
it's fine.
the most realistic. I mean, this is just my own judgment as a Fast and the Furious virgin.
Yeah. Well, no, just in general, it's fine. It's nothing to write home about, I'd say. But with that, what would you say your final grade for the film is?
Oh, may I say B plus? Just because it almost was an A, just because the structure of the film. But I did enjoy it. And I would watch the next one. In fact, if I have time, I'd probably go and watch the others, the ones before X or 10. But otherwise, what do you think? What's your grade?
I'm gonna have to go with a C plus at this point. It was more entertaining at certain parts than some of the previous films, I would definitely would say. But overall, just way too much trying to be stuffed into too long, which ended up being too short of a time in essence for what they were trying to do. And some of the most ridiculous parts were just too much at this point. And it's starting to grate on me with how much it just won't stop. and, and with that,
I did enjoy chatting with you, and believe it or not, guys, I did sit with Matthew watching this film since we are in the same city, by the way.
absolutely.
Thank you
Louis,
very
thank you
much,
so much for your
Matthew.
time.
You're the best.
Everybody, thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.